Ciao, I'm Mario, a Swiss car guy on YouTube, and this is my 2009 Nissan GT-R. And today I'm making a video about the things I hate about the car, whereas hate is a very strong word. Let's say the things that I don't very much like about this car. So let's start. The controls are too similar. So you have the same knob for volume, for temperature, and for tune and for intensity of the ventilation. So it's a bit difficult to use the car blind without looking at it. And also the buttons for skip and for next track, they are basically the same size as all the other square buttons. So it's not that intuitive to use. The Glovebox light only works if the car's lights are on. So if you turn off the lights, if the car is off, the Glovebox will stay dark. After you start the car, the USB drive is read in quite slowly. So it takes about, I reckon, 2 minutes to read the contents of a 128 gigabyte USB drive. So if you want to listen to music from USB and you have a large drive, the first few minutes you're going to be without any music. The car's GPS is basically useless. I mean, it's already a 3D display navigation, so not one of the old style two-dimensional ones, but I mean, the material is old. You can update the maps, but it's kind of expensive and quite a weird and tedious process to do because it takes hours apparently. And even though the maps are old, the few times I've used this navigation system, it lost track quite often. For example, on a straight bit of motorway, all of a sudden it thought, well, I am on this road next to the motorway. So in my opinion, it is basically useless. And also the route calculation and the destination entry, it takes forever. The GT-R, of course, has its classic screen with the additional instruments, which was famously designed by Polyphony Digital, the makers of Gran Turismo. But the thing is, while the screen is nice, and it's what I have on most of the time, if I want to know what the air conditioning temperature is set at, I don't know, I can't see it. So I either have to change the temperature, then it displays it very briefly, or I have to go into this status menu where it will show me that and it will also show me what music is playing. In the sat-nav screen it shows temperature and the title of the song playing, but as soon as I'm in one of the GT-R specific screens, I get nothing. In the instrument cluster you have a digital display of the speed, but it's one of many displays. So if you want to see the temperature, for example the outside temperature, you do not get your speed. And if you go back to the speed, it will basically be overridden once you set the cruise control. If you use cruise, it doesn't temporarily show the speed. So the speed display is not permanently visible, it's just one of the functions on the multifunction display. And I think the digital speed display is important because the scale here on the analog one is quite tight, so it's not that easy to see how fast you're actually going. The cup holders are too shallow. I mean, they're probably fine if you have like a large cup, but there's one that is deeper than the other one. But even this one, if you have like larger bottles or even half-liter bottles, they don't really hold well, also because it's slightly too wide for them. And if you have these narrow like Red Bull cans, the thin ones, they don't hold at all. And even for putting a phone in, it could be a bit taller, a bit better, so I don't like the cup holders. While the GT-R has electric mirrors that fold in and fold out, they cannot do so automatically. So you always have to do it manually. And I personally, I would like it if you turn the car off, you lock it, the mirrors fold, but they don't. So every time I turn off the car, before I do that, I do this. And then after I turn the car off, I push this button so that when I start the car, they will unfold. There is also no memory for the side mirror adjustment, meaning they don't have the tilt down feature, that where a mirror automatically tilts down once you're in reverse so that you can see a curb and do not curb your wheels. And the mirrors are not the only thing without a memory, because the car has electric seats but they don't have memory function. And it's not because my car wasn't spec'd with it. A memory function was not available on the GT-R. It's crazy. To me, electric seats without memory are basically pointless. With age, the seat gets a bit widened out by the fat driver sitting in it, and this results in the seat rubbing against the center console, which creates creaking noises. I fixed it by putting a rag between the seat and the center console, a pink one for instance, and this stops the creaking, but of course it doesn't necessarily look very good, even though most people wouldn't even notice it. And I've even thought about getting a black one, but I never have. The seating position in the GT-R is not great. For my preference, it's too high up. I am a taller person, I'm about 1.84 m, and to me I am too high up, the seat should be lower, and also I am very close to the roof, which in itself is not a problem, it doesn't touch, but it's one of those sloping roofs, which means that it goes down and it obstructs some of my view. The same also goes for the rear view mirror, which also is kind of directly in my line of sight. So it's a car which clearly seems to be made for shorter people or people with shorter torsos. But even if you're not that tall, the thing is, between the rear view mirror and the top of the dashboard, there's actually only like a hand of visibility. So the rear view mirror really is in the way in this car. Visibility out the front is not great. But then again, visibility out of the back isn't great either. Because first, the rear window isn't really large. Then there's also the spoiler that's kind of in your way. And the other thing is the car is quite bulky. It has quite a big rear end and it's kind of difficult to see out, especially with the C-pillars being so large. And if you look to the side, the seat basically obstructs any view into the tiny rear corner window. So visibility isn't great, and most importantly, this is a car that was not fitted with parking sensors. This is a car that was not fitted with a backup camera, which I find absolutely hilarious because in 2009 all these technologies were available and had been available for some time, and even the car is built to have it. The car's infotainment system was built from the get-go to accommodate rear view cameras. As you can see, I've just fitted an aftermarket one, but I could activate it in the car's menu because it was all there. When putting the car in reverse, it constantly beeps. And as far as I can tell, for no reason, because it only beeps inside the car. So it's not an external warning for blind people or something like that. No, it's just for the driver to constantly tell you the car is in reverse, which is extremely weird. I've never seen any other car do this. And funnily enough, in these early GT-Rs, you could have dealer installed parking sensors. And those dealer installed parking sensors, they would be audio only, so you would not have any visual clues that it's doing anything. So you would only have beep, and that would be in addition to the beep from the reverse. So you would have a symphony of beeps, but the car beeps in reverse, which is annoying. Also, the car has a quite aggressive limited slip differential, which means when you are backing out, when you're reversing, when you're turning, it tends to lock up and make the car hop about. Another thing about the GT-R, the suspension, especially in soft mode, it clunks whenever you hit an irregularity in the road. It basically sounds as if the car is broken, but this is completely normal. Oh yes, another thing that I would say bothers me slightly about the GT-R is it is quite harsh. And I realize it is a sports car, but still, I mean, driving around slowly, it shakes about. There is some noises from the interior, and of course the noises from the drivetrain, the noises from the suspension. Yes. Newer GT-Rs, in fact the 2017 I've driven, are much more refined, much more comfortable, but they're not any less loud actually. Still they have the same drivetrain, the drivetrain still makes a lot of noise. Another thing that annoys me in the GT-R is that the gearbox, it doesn't skip gears. For example, now I'm driving 5th gear, so if I shift down twice, it shifts each gear. It doesn't skip 4th, it first goes into 4th and then it goes into 3rd, which is not the way I would drive a manual, because in a manual I would skip a gear, obviously, I wouldn't shift into a gear that is necessary, but the GT-R doesn't do it. And I think it's the same on the upshifts. Yeah. The first generation GT-R, the CBA cars, they were often criticized for having bad brakes. But you see, I have not driven this car on the track. I drive it in regular traffic, and for regular traffic the brakes are actually really good. The only thing I do not like about the GT-R brakes is they tend to squeak. But this is something you're going to have with most sports cars. Another thing I don't particularly like about the GT-R is that when you drive it in auto mode, which I tend to do around town, it shifts quite early. So you're stuck driving in quite high gears. And when you want power from the car, so when you push the pedal down, it takes a moment, it needs to shift down first, and the car feels kind of sluggish. In this case, I have countered it a bit with a modified software for the gearbox, which shifts later, which drives in lower gears and makes the car feel more sprightly in day-to-day traffic. Sure, it will raise fuel consumption, but then again, a GT-R is never going to be a Prius in that regard, so who cares? There is no way to program the headlights to always turn on with the ignition, so you always have to do it manually. Yes, the car does have auto headlights, but I personally do not like them. I always drive with my headlights on, and there is no way to set it in this car, so I always have to turn them on manually and turn them off manually each time I start the car. The GT-R is quite a large car. It has a pretty big butt, and it's also quite long. It has a wheelbase of 2.80 m, which is a bit too big for the roads that I drive, because in Switzerland the mountain roads, they tend to be quite narrow and there are a lot of hairpins, and the car with a long wheelbase with locking diff and 4x4 is not great in tight corners in hairpins. This is a car that's built for fast corners and we do not have too many of them here. So for the Swiss roads, the GT-R is actually a bit too large. The GT-R, which has its gearbox at the back, it's a transaxle. When it came out, this first generation, this is a 2009 CBA first production series, it had a launch control that was super aggressive, and it was so aggressive that after repeated use it could damage your gearbox. This is a disadvantage of one of these early cars, but you can flash the gearbox to a newer software using a COP access port, which I did. So my car has gone from LC1, the first generation launch control, to a LC5, which is the 5th generation launch control, and this is completely unproblematic for the gearbox. It's probably a bit slower, but it's still plenty fast enough and it will not damage your gearbox. The GT-R has a surprisingly large trunk for a sports car. In fact, it's very usable. It's larger than the trunk of my Lexus LS600H. But because the gearbox is right underneath the trunk tends to get quite warm. So if you want to transport perishable goods for a longer period, don't, or use a cooler or something like that, because it gets quite toasty and warm in it. Talking about the trunk, the GT-R doesn't have a double floor in the trunk. It's nothing underneath it, so it doesn't have a spare wheel. And I understand on a car with staggered wheels, meaning the rear wheels are larger than the front wheels, a spare wheels usually is not that useful because you'll never have the right size of wheel you need when you break one. But if you live in a more remote place, this might be a problem. Being the high-strung sports car that it is, the GT-R needs higher octane fuel. In this case, 100 octane, which in Switzerland isn't even available everywhere, so I mostly use 98 octane, but it uses the more expensive fuel, which I realize is quite normal for a sports car, but then again, especially with fuel prices we have right now, it costs more to fill up. The GT-R's rear lights are very distinctive, but due to their recessed nature, water tends to pool here and leave ugly water spots. Another thing I do not like about the Nissan GT-R is Nissan's stupid warranty policies. Because when this car came out, your warranty would be voided if you used launch control. And the reason is Nissan put a too aggressive launch control into the car. I mean, why put the function in the car that you're not allowed to use? When this car came out, your warranty would be voided if you disabled traction control. Can you believe it? And Nissan would void your warranty if you drove the car on a racetrack. So they built a car to beat the Nürburgring, to set record times there, and then if you took it there, they would void your warranty. That's pathetic. And it also created a notion that the GT-R is a fragile car, which I think it isn't. Another thing that really annoys me is Nissan's service policy. Because you see, not every Nissan dealer is allowed to work on a GT-R. That's only the special Nissan high performance centers, which at some point in Switzerland there were only 2. Right now there I believe are 5, but the one in Zurich closed, so the closest to me would be in Lucerne, which is like 40 minutes away. And that means for everything that's GT-R specific, you need to go to those dealers, because regular Nissan dealers, they cannot even diagnose a GT-R, let alone program features. And the other thing is, if you go to a Nissan high performance center and you look at the price lists, you see that the most mundane things just cost more if you're a GT-R. So even stuff like tire storage and tire change on a GT-R is more expensive than on a regular Nissan, even though I reckon that most Muranos and Qashqais now have 20-inch wheels. But it's just more expensive because it's a GT-R. And that is very annoying. Another thing that's really annoying about Nissan service policies is that spare parts for this car are unreasonably priced. And I mean specifically stuff like brakes. The rear brakes, discs and pads for this car cost 5,000 Swiss francs, which is utterly ridiculous, because I bought the Brembo discs, which are the same as OEM, for 800 francs for both, and Nissan still wanted 2.5 grand for those. Brake pads also mysteriously cost 2 grand at Nissan, but any really good third party, even upgrade brake pad, is way cheaper. So you basically have to go aftermarket because spare prices are so ridiculously expensive. Another thing that is not great on the GT-R, it's actually starting to develop rust in the wheel arches. I mean, I realize this is a 13-year-old car, but still, I mean, it has been driven in the winter, and if you look at the curbing here on the wheel, it has been driven, you know, not too carefully. But there is beginnings of rust in the wheel arches. Okay, so those were the things I don't like about the Nissan GT-R. What are your opinions? Am I too nitpicky? Am I the wrong guy to drive a GT-R? Please comment down below. If you like this video, please leave a like. Consider subscribing to my channel for more content, possibly on this car, but also on others. And follow me on Instagram at SwissCarGuyMario. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day. Bye!